They spoke when it happened. The wind moved first, and then the sound of boots stopped. Whatever the rancher had just done, it wasn't supposed to happen this way. And yet, everyone was watching. This wasn't a story about cruelty. It was a story about what happens after a line is crossed. He was known as a quiet man. Not kind, not cruel. Just someone who kept to himself and didn't ask questions anymore. The frontier had already taken its share from him. A wife buried beneath the cottonwoods, a son who never made it past winter. Whatever he'd done back then, he never did it again. People said he'd become hollow, that the house on the ridge was more tomb than home, but they still came to him when they needed something done, because quiet men don't talk, and the frontier valued silence more than mercy. She appeared at dusk. No horse, no belongings, just the clothes on her back and dust in her hair. She stood there, barely holding herself together, dust on her clothes, fear in her voice. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "Please, don't make me do this." That was the moment everything stopped being simple, because he hadn't asked her to do anything. Not yet. But she was already afraid of what came next. And on the frontier, fear like that, it wasn't about strangers. It was about the people you already knew. He brought her inside, not to help her, but because leaving her outside felt worse. The barn was dark, hay scattered across the floor, the smell of leather and old wood. She kept her eyes down. He kept his distance. He didn't ask her name. She didn't offer it. There are questions that once asked can't be unheard, and answers that change everything. Instead, he gave her water, a blanket, space. Whatever the title promised, it hadn't happened yet, but something hung in the air between them. Not desire, not violence, recognition. Because he'd seen that look before, in his wife's eyes years ago, right before the men from town came for her brother, right before she stopped speaking altogether. She stayed silent for an hour. Then, as darkness settled over the ridge, she whispered, "If they find me here, you'll regret it." He didn't ask who they were. The frontier taught men not to ask questions they couldn't undo. But he understood, because there were only two kinds of women who showed up alone at a stranger's door after dark. Those running from the law, and those running from the men who made it. She wasn't the first kind. The horses came at dawn. 3 of them, maybe 4. Voices carried across the ridge before the riders did. Someone claimed ownership. Someone claimed law. And suddenly the rancher wasn't alone with his decision anymore. He stepped outside. The woman stayed hidden in the barn. The man leading the group was familiar. A merchant from town, well-dressed, well-spoken. The kind of man who smiled when he wanted something. "Morning, friend. I'm looking for someone. A woman. My wife, actually." The rancher said nothing. "She's unwell, prone to confusion. We're worried about her safety." Still nothing. The merchant's smile tightened. "If you've seen her, it's your duty to tell me. She's not, in her right mind. Could hurt herself, could hurt others." This is where viewers think, "Oh, so that's what the title means." But it still isn't, because the rancher had already noticed something. The way the other men avoided eye contact, the way their hands stayed near their guns, the way the merchant spoke about his wife like she was property he'd misplaced. What the town believed wasn't the truth. What the papers would later say wasn't justice. And what the woman feared wasn't him. It was what would happen if he did nothing. The merchant stepped closer. I know she's here. I can smell her perfume on the wind. A lie, but a confident one. If you're hiding her, you're breaking the law, interfering with a man's rights over his own wife. The rancher finally spoke. She asked me not to let you take her. Silence. The merchant's smile disappeared entirely. She's my wife. The law says a lot of things, doesn't make 'em right. One of the other men shifted in his saddle, nervous. The merchant leaned forward. I'll ask you one more time, friend, where is she? The rancher didn't answer. Instead, he said something else. You want to know where she is? Then you'll have to look. The merchant's eyes narrowed. Where? The rancher nodded toward the barn. In there. But she told me something before you arrived. What? She said, you can look, just not there. The merchant dismounted, angry now. I'll look wherever I damn well please. This is the pivot. Because what the rancher knew and what the woman had warned him about wasn't about modesty. It wasn't about shame. It was about evidence. The rancher led him to the barn. The woman was still inside, still silent. The merchant moved toward her, but the rancher stepped between them. She said, you can look, just not there. He pointed, not at her face, not at her body, at her back. The merchant stopped. Move aside. No, I said move. I told you not to let you see, but I think everyone else should. The rancher turned to the other men. You want to know why she ran? Look at her back. Look at what he's been doing to her for months. The woman stood, slowly, trembling, and then she turned around. The dress was torn. Beneath it, scars, burns, marks that couldn't be explained away as accidents. One of the other men looked away. Another cursed under his breath. The merchant's face went pale. That's none of your concern. She's your wife. I know. You said that already. The rancher stepped forward. But she's also a person, and I'm not letting you take her. Not in anger, not in desire, not the way people would later describe it. He did it because someone had to, and because once, long ago, he hadn't. His wife had those same scars, and he'd stayed silent until it was too late. The merchant reached for his gun, but the other men didn't. One of them, a younger man, maybe a deputy, spoke quietly. I think we've seen enough. The merchant turned on him. You work for me. I work for the law, and this isn't lawful. The merchant looked around, outnumbered, outmatched. He mounted his horse without another word, but before he left, he looked at the rancher. This isn't over. Yes, the rancher said quietly, it is. No one celebrated. No one apologized. The men from town rode back in silence. The woman stayed where she was safe. She never said thank you. She didn't have to. Some debts can't be repaid with words. The rancher went back to his work, fixed the fence, fed the animals, swept the porch, and for the first time in years, the house didn't feel quite so empty. The town stayed silent about what happened. The merchant left within a month. Some said he went east. Others said he just disappeared. No one asked questions, because the frontier valued silence more than mercy. But sometimes silence was mercy. The woman stayed on the ridge for another year. Then one day she was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just a note on the kitchen table. You looked where I told you not to, and you saw what needed to be seen. Thank you. The rancher folded the note carefully and went back to being alone, just not the same kind of alone. People still argue about what really happened that day, about whether the rancher was right,
about whether the title tells the whole truth. Some say he overstepped, that a man's home is his castle, and what happens inside it isn't anyone else's business. Others say he should have done more, should have ridden into town and made sure the merchant faced justice. But the rancher never spoke about it again, because on the frontier, the right thing and the legal thing weren't always the same. And sometimes looking where you're told not to is exactly what saves a life. So here's the question. What would you have done in his place? Would you have looked? Would you have let her take her? Or would you have stayed silent like so many others did? If stories like this matter, stories about the moments no one agrees about, then subscribe, because the frontier was built on decisions like these, and history never tells you which ones were right.